Councilmember Dish.
Here.
Councilmember Harrison.
Here.
Councilmember Song.
Here.
Councilmember Watson. Absent. Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Here.
Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Iyer.
Here.
Councilmember Ackman.
Here.
Councilmember Briggs.
Here.
Councilmember Cornell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Iyer, seconded by Councilmember Ackman. Discussion of the agenda. Councilmember Medina.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move to amend the agenda to add the proposed item, resolution to revise previous approval of issuance of new Class C quota liquor license in the city of Ann Arbor to Chayla's Restaurant in Tuckeria.
Where would that be to go?
How about the end of new business?
C5?
Yes.
It's been recommended over here at DC, as a DC.
Yeah, DC 5.
In anticipation, perhaps, of it being short, maybe we'll put it at DC 0.
Okay.
Is there a second to that? Second by Councilmember Watson. Discussion of the amendment.
I can just briefly explain that this is a previous recommendation that we have already approved. Chayla's had to come back to the Liquor License Review Commission because their address is actually at technically 2 addresses, and the application only included 1. And so the state has them on hold for that reason. There are a few other things that they're working to modify, but we wanted to make sure that we could get this through quickly so that if everything else falls into place in the next 2 weeks, they're not waiting on us to reapprove something we've already approved.
Excellent. Further discussion of the amendment? All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. It's also notable that Liquor License Commission met on Friday this week, which fell after the submission deadline for an amendment, for a ordinance or resolution.
Thank you. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? It is approved. Further discussion of the agenda as amended. All in favor? Opposed? The agenda is approved. Are there communications today from our city administrator?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. We do have Chair Carter from the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission for an update. Chair Carter, you have the con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. City Administrator, and Madam Clerk. We are meeting, we're back to meeting, as I mentioned before, we did meet July and August. We are continuing to handle our complaint review. We are meeting with the police chief, and he's been very open and receptive to meet with us, and we're very happy about that. And we are reviewing some specific policies in light of various things that are going on in the city at this time. I wanted to let you know about NACOL, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. It is a national organization. There are, everyone's not a member, but it's my understanding that presently there are about 250 different oversight bodies across the country. And NACOL is their national organization. Some of us are attending the conference, which will be, as a matter of fact, next week. We'll be attending that. I've asked that the commission take a look at the NACOL Code of Ethics and that we approve it at our next meeting. And so I want to let you know just a few things about the NACOL Code of Ethics. Civilian oversight practitioners have a unique role as public servants overseeing law enforcement agencies. And so this code of ethics includes personal integrity, independent and thorough oversight, transparency and confidentiality, respectful and unbiased treatment of everyone that we deal with, outreach and relationships with stakeholders, agency self-examination and commitment to policy review, professional excellence, and primary obligation to the community. These are the pillars of the NACO Code of Ethics, and we're hoping to approve that at our next meeting and join citizens like Berkeley and Boise, Idaho, and Charlottesville, Cincinnati, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, all across the country, commissions as ours who have signed on to this Code of Ethics, and we believe that it's appropriate for Ann Arbor to join them. So that's what's new. If there aren't any questions at all, then thank you and good evening.
Thank you. We now come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers in all instances will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk or the time clock will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time is expired. When your time is expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Our first speaker today is Elizabeth Hunter.
Since 2009, the county sheriff's budget is up 85%. The number of deputies is down 38%. FOIA revealed that in 2017, the year the Public Safety and Community Mental Health Preservation millage passed, CMH employed 43 mental health professionals, including 5 psychiatrists. 6 years and $18 million in millage funds later, CMH still employs 43 mental health professionals and 5 psychiatrists. Yet the salaries of non-clinical administrative staff have soared. Look at the culture of county overspending, corruption, and ethical misconduct. Do you want to throw them more money? To be blunt, many of them need to be let go before we discuss more money for the county. It will only go to higher salaries for management. This is exactly what actually happened with the original mental health millage increase. On a totally different topic, months ago, a city council member sitting here today walked by our downtown anti-war protest. She burst into uproarious laughter, even stomping her foot for emphasis. Her contempt for us was obvious and her actions somewhat cartoonish. 60% of our federal taxes go to bombing countries, carrying out mass murder, and destroying infrastructure and societies. Ann Arbor Coalition Against War has protested U.S. military aggression since 1964. Many officials have walked by, always respectfully, and with at least a pretense of agreement with us, a few even stopping to discuss issues. The disrespect from this representative was shocking, as she made fun of our community engagement. Shouldn't that be encouraged? Engagement, that is? We hoped that she wasn't laughing at the countless children killed in Palestine or the Israeli, U.S., and NATO war crimes and torture. We noted her actions were emblematic of council's sometimes outright disdain for residents, chiding public comment speakers, reprimanding residents, attacking citizen activists on social media or out in the community. But what the public wants from officials are cooperation, respect, and yes, kindness. If she was laughing only at me, it's still reprehensible from an official. But the protesters present that day were left with the impression that her attempt at humiliation was for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dan Kelly.
Mayor, I believe Mr. Kelly is joining us on Zoom. Mr. Kelly, phone number ending in 426. Press star 6 to unmute your phone.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city manager. My name is Dan Kelly. I'm the director of the Shelter Association of Washington County. We operate the Delana Center out of downtown Ann Arbor. On behalf of the Shelter Association, I would like to formally voice my support for the current resolution for county millage rebate use, presented this evening as meeting agenda item DC-2. The Shelter Association supports the allocation of the millage rebate funding for supportive services and affordable housing because this annual investment is critical to maintaining high quality, affordable, and supportive housing. Without these funds, over 650 households would not receive the critical supportive services they need to permanently maintain their housing and thrive in our communities. These efforts are especially critical now as we see increases in homelessness across the community, with currently over 150 people waiting for a shelter bed at the Shelter Association. These resources help us support preventing more people in need across our community from experiencing homelessness, giving them much needed support with a variety of services, including specifically using a trauma-informed lens. As mentioned, we thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. We support the resolution and are supportive of passing the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Scott Ellis.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Scott Ellis, and I am a resident of Ward 4, and tonight I am here speaking as a staff member of Avalon Housing, which is a local nonprofit here in our community that creates affordable housing and provides wraparound support services to our neighbors exiting homelessness. Data from our county's most recent point-in-time count shows that total homelessness has increased here in Washtenaw County by 20% since 2020. And chronic homelessness, which is when folks have experienced homelessness for at least 1 year or repeatedly while struggling with a disabling condition, that has increased by almost 50% since 2020. This is part of the reason why the rebate funding from the Public Safety and Mental Health Millage, a portion of which is currently being used for supportive housing services, is so vital. This funding supports Avalon case managers who help clients living in Ann Arbor Housing Commission properties overcome serious conditions that jeopardize their health and well-being and often their housing. These wraparound services are key to helping people stay housed once an affordable home opens up to them. Without this funding, many more of our neighbors would be at risk of losing their housing. Maintaining this funding going forward is vital. Since Avalon and the Housing Commission are responding to our homelessness crisis by creating and building several hundred units of affordable housing over the next few years, our community will need to increase these types of supportive services going forward to ensure that the transition for those future tenants into stable housing is successful. Thank you all for your commitment to more supportive, affordable housing here in Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Aaron Cooper.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Administrator, and Madam Clerk. My name is Aaron Cooper, and I serve as the Executive Director for Avalon Housing. First, I just want to thank you, Mayor, and the Council for bringing such an important resolution to the floor today regarding the city millage rebate. This shows the city's support and dedication to ensuring our most vulnerable citizens receive the aid that they need to maintain housing and receive the necessary services to live equitably in our community. I've worked personally in 4 different communities before coming to Ann Arbor, and this is the first time that I've seen such a resolution for supportive services and housing development. So I just commend you all for your dedication to this community. Dedicating 40% of the millage to supportive housing services is a hugely significant contribution to the well-being of the people living in our community and in the Housing Commission properties. At Avalon, we partner with the Housing Commission to provide dedicated staffing and services to nearly 200 individuals and families in 9 different Housing Commission properties. These services can include food assistance through food pantries that we manage, mental health support, medical care coordination, community and social programming, eviction prevention programming, and probably the most important is the 24/7 staffing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week staffing that allows us for the diversion of resources from city public safety services, like usage of police, fire, and rescue, and emergency room visits. If the current trend of increasing housing costs continues, as we expect, the need for affordable housing and supportive services will only grow. We at Avalon remain committed to working with our partners in the city to ensure this city is a place for all, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Therefore, we urge council to continue the allocations as stated in the resolution, and we just appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is David Garcia.
Good evening, board members. My name is David Garcia, and on behalf of Ozone House, I would like to formally voice our support for the county millage rebate resolution. Ozone House supports the allocation of the millage rebate funding towards supportive services and affordable housing. This annual investment is critical to maintaining high-quality, affordable, and permanent supportive housing in Washtenaw County. In a few days, I will have been an Ozone House case manager for 3 years. I've worked with various young people that have significantly benefited from the collaborative case management services of Ozone, Avalon Housing, and the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. Our objective is to help individuals become empowered and gain the life skills to keep their housing. Oftentimes, some of the young people in our community have experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences, physical disabilities, and/or mental health challenges. However, their resilience to persevere despite the adversity of being unhoused is truly inspiring. I've worked with a young person living in their car and sleeping in parking lots. They describe their car with optimism as a 2-bedroom apartment with a blanket dividing the front and back bedroom. I've worked with another young person who came out of the foster care system with significant childhood trauma. Although their foster care support advocates did their best to serve their needs, the layers of trauma were deeply rooted. By utilizing the combination of getting housed with a housing choice or project-based voucher with supportive services, they started to develop their version of a life worth living. They are both thriving in their own space now, maintaining employment, attending school, completing driver's training, learning how to cook healthy meals in a kitchen they've always wanted, and one of them is even advocating for other youth in our community. These are just 2 scenarios amongst countless others. I would like to add that everyone deserves a home. However, getting housed is just one component. It is the team of community partners working together to help people develop the life skills to remain housed that is critical. It is also the coming together and support of the residents of our county, the landlords, you as the board, and most of all, the young people and others in need that will make this a possibility. In closing, without these funds, over 650 households would not receive the critical supportive services they need to permanently maintain their housing and thrive in the area we live. Therefore, we urge you to pass this resolution to help procure and facilitate the mission to end homelessness. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Leslie Stembaugh.
How many of us would sign up for a job that required us to stand without being able to sit down from time to time for 8 hours a day, or 7 hours a day, or 6 hours a day? Most of us couldn't or wouldn't. We can't expect people, most of us won't even expect that people would imagine that we could work that way. Because standing up for hours is back-breaking work in itself. We can't help but assume that these would be at least negotiations with business owners or supervisors about what standing was necessary and what other options were available when standing wasn't essential. When Councilmember Kazi Edwin first told me that she was working on the right to sit ordinance, I know I was confused. Why would it be needed in 2024? Of course, I knew that laws like this were necessary in the early 1900s, but now, Haven't we all learned by now that treating our employees well is the way to go? Better productivity, better satisfaction for jobs, better mental health, more humane. It's almost certainly true that a lot of folks who have jobs that require a great deal of standing do in fact have chairs available for downtimes and for those times when the work that they do could really be done just as well sitting down. It makes so much sense, and it makes so little sense not to do it. A right to sit protection is not needed everywhere, but it is needed when it's needed. We've heard from people in the last city council meeting, for example, in public comment, that there are still business owners who are not allow accommodations necessary to keep their workers from risking their health just to work in that place. Passing right to sit could open up opportunities for local businesses to talk about how they could still do a great job while lessening the cost of that effort on their employees' bodies. The right to sit protection is being proposed to become an amendment to the city's non-discrimination ordinance. As such, if it's adopted, the Human Rights Commission would plan to enforce it in ways that are similar to how we now enforce workplace discrimination. We've discussed this as a commission, appreciate the intent of this amendment, and believe that passing this ordinance could work well for businesses in Ann Arbor and for those who work there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexis Reed.
Hello, everyone. My name's Lexi, and I'm a law school student, also in the School of Social Work at the U of M. I'm also a service industry worker here within Ann Arbor. I'm here to comment on the right to sit. I moved to Ann Arbor about 2 months ago from St. Louis, Missouri, where workers are afforded the right to sit. As a worker who can spend anywhere from 6 to 15 hours a day on my feet, the right to sit has protected my physical and mental health. Being able to sit while on the clock did not negatively affect the impact of my work, nor did it financially impact my employer. I have worked closely with people who experience varying disabilities in their various forms, and the right to sit has offered them to be seen and heard in their place of employment. Upon the implementation of the right to sit in St. Louis, worker morale has only improved. Employees are feeling respected and appreciated and accommodated. Employers are not experiencing a shortage in job tasks being completed, and the relationships between employers and employees have greatly improved. The right to sit promotes human rights and dignity of all employees, and it should be implemented into the city of Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Zachary Damon.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I'd like to thank Lexi and, of course, Chair Stanbaugh for their supportive comments. I also am speaking on behalf of Agenda Item C1, DC-1, the Right to Sit Ordinance. As a member of the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues, I'd like to take a moment to speak about the Right to Sit Ordinance, and of course, most importantly, the process behind it. So first of all, I want to let everybody know that, the Commission on Disability Issues, as well as myself personally, we had the privilege of being involved every step of the way on this process, and making sure that the voice of people with disabilities were not only heard, but taken seriously on this ordinance. This ordinance is about more than a place to rest. It's about recognizing that disability rights are indeed human rights. The ability to sit when needed is fundamental, and the well-being of residents is not just for people with disabilities who benefit, but whoever needs it, whether it's the elderly or a pregnant woman or somebody with a temporary injury. So everyone deserves the dignity and access to basic accommodations. But this is not just about individuals. This is also good business, folks. I mean, let's face it, making our public spaces accessible creates a more inclusive community where everyone feels welcome. When people feel supported, they can contribute more fully, whereas employees, patrons, and residents can also enjoy it, and our city has a bigger financial exchange. Disability rights are cornerstones of a thriving and inclusive community. By supporting the right to sit, we are affirming our commitment to making sure that Ann Arbor is a place where everyone, regardless of ability, can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jess Riley.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Jess Riley, and I'm a graduate social work student at the University of Michigan. I'm here today to reiterate my points from last meeting supporting the right to sit resolution and ordinance. If you all may remember, I spoke about my experience as someone in food service who had been denied the right to sit before, as did several others in various industries. I also brought attention to the negative health impacts of prolonged standing. I touched on how this is a human rights issue and provided evidence that the right to sit actually leads to productivity, increased productivity. If passed, this would be an incredible win for workers across the city. I hope that this can be unanimously supported by council as it protects workers' rights and emphasizes the health, safety, and dignity of all employees. I just want to wrap up by saying thank you to everyone who's come out to support the right to sit, the Human Rights Commission and the Commission on Disability Issues for their contributions, and the sponsors of the resolution for being champions on this effort. I hope that you all continue to listen to those who would be impacted by this, keeping in mind that many cannot be here because they're currently working. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sean Higgins.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. I'm Sean Higgins, Ward 4 resident and Secretary of Ann Arbor for Public Power. I'm here to speak on the RFP Electric Grid Asset Valuation and Municipalization Study. Organization has gone back and forth with you folks on this quite a bit, and I want to express gratitude for your time and availability to discuss this RFP in detail, but I'm here to express concerns about the contents of the RFP. We believe the study should resolve a single cost valuation and particularly involve serious legal analysis of the stranded costs and going concern. I would like to see the formation of a full public electric utility go on the ballot in Ann Arbor, and I would like the public to be informed about the real potential cost of municipalization when that happens. The Phase 1 study showed the potential cost is currently a wide range, largely composed of these legal intangibles. I appreciate some of the reasons we've been given that this analysis shouldn't be part of the study, that there's a worry of locking in a specific approach to municipalization rather than looking at other possibilities which could weaken or exhibit A in a future evaluation court case. But what I just don't get is why this concern or the desire to wait until a litigation team is determined for this future court case means that we shouldn't explicitly ask for a legal analysis in the RFP for this next study to resolve those vast cost ranges in Phase 1. Without the resolution of those costs, my worry is the people of Ann Arbor will just not have a sufficiently clear picture of what the cost of immunity could be, and we won't get to that court case in the first place because DTE will be able to leverage that uncertainty to scare people off of this opportunity to create an accountable energy utility that has reliable, renewable, and affordable power. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Greg Woodring.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor and council members. My name is Greg Woodring. I'm the president of Ann Arbor for Public Power, and I am here also speaking about the RFP for the municipal electric valuation. I want to start by saying that I'm very grateful for the work that this council has already done in moving this issue forward. It is fantastic that you've met with us, that you have moved forward with the Phase 1 study and are moving forward with the Phase 2 study. We only need to look at the news right now to understand the urgency of this issue. Overlapping hurricanes leading to disasters at chemical plants spells a horrifying vision of the future that is only going to continue to escalate. The need for urgency on climate has never been more clear. I worry that the way that the Phase 2 study is positioned is going to cause unnecessary delays. There is a long history of Phase 2 studies throughout this country. Yes, this would be the first time by acquisition a municipal utility was formed in Michigan. However, this is a process that has been done successfully by many other cities across the country. When you look at those studies, they provide a single cost number for the valuation of assets, and they do oftentimes, almost universally, include a legal study as a portion of that cost. As Sean already outlined, the cost $280 million to $1.15 billion largely is driven by uncertainty over the legal costs. I'm very grateful that this council has taken this issue seriously enough to allocate $1 million in funding for this study. However, such a well-funded study certainly can include a legal analysis in order to narrow down that range. The Ann Arbor for Public Power did commission a legal study into the Phase 1 feasibility study. We asked Chris Bisdock, former mayor of Traverse City and member of the board of Traverse City Power and Light, in addition to being an environmental lawyer that works on rate cases at the state level, to look at this study. And he found that the high-end valuation numbers were simply unsupported, that there was not a legitimate reason to include those high-end estimate numbers. If this Phase 2 study includes such a high range of estimates, it is going to lead to unnecessary uncertainty and delays, and it will require further work by this council in order to narrow down that number so that the public is sufficiently informed. I hope that the RFP will be amended so that at the conclusion of this study, we are well positioned to fight for a good, fair valuation of the assets and move forward aggressively towards 100% municipalization. Because as the Phase 1 study itself showed, that is our only route to 100% renewable power for Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Andre Watson.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm here today with Rolando here. We're representing the Elks Lodge. First of all, we'd like to thank the City of Ann Arbor for all of the contributions and making us a part of the bicentennial program that allows us to raise funds to make sure that we're part of Ann Arbor for another 200 or so years. But today we're here to announce an upcoming event where we will be inviting the community out so that they can learn more about the community, and that those who've been to our lodge before can reacquaint themselves with what's going on that's new there. We also we have a special thank you to the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation for their vision to provide the necessary support so that we can have this event. We also realize that very few people knew about the lodge. It's a critical part, in essence, a community space for the historically African American community out of necessity. But some know, but there are many who did not know. And so our objective is to introduce it to the overall communities. And we would ask you all to please push it within your networks. It's a very special place. Not only is it critical to Ann Arbor, I don't think another place exists of its kind with the magnitude. I think it's over 3 acres. It's a beautiful establishment, and there are many citizens who just don't know about it. But we do believe that this affair would allow them to know about it, become more active and support, and we just ask that you all push it within your networks so that we can make this happen, because it is very essential. And that's what convicted me as a citizen. That's the only really reason I live in Ann Arbor, is because I can find places to identify with. It's pleasant and it's nice here, but it helps to see others. Yeah, so this would be a terrible thing to lose. Rolando's going to explain more about the day itself.
The day itself is just slated as a community fun day, literally to just read.
I'm so sorry. We have there are rules about that we were not able to transfer time to other speakers. You are being totally cool about it. It would be abused in other contexts.
No worries.
So my apologies. But you still have the floor, Mr. Watts.
Sure.
If you can talk a little bit about it.
We're going to have all kinds of fun events. We're going to have food. We're going to have music. We're going to have things that are really intertwined with culture, community, and it's something that could be preserved from the old Ann Arbor. I'm sure many of us are aware of how new things are around here, how things are changing. So there's such synergies in preserving this spot and its place and reintroducing this spot to the new community members.
Is there a date?
Oh, sorry. October 27th from 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m.
You're the best.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you all.
Our next speaker is Ken Garber.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Ken Garber, 2nd Ward. Like Mr. Higgins and Mr. Woodring, I'm here to talk about the feasibility study RFP. I've been involved with Ann Arbor for Public Power for 5 years, and I've never felt this hopeless. And the reason is that it looks to me like this study is designed to fail. Not fail us, but fail the public. The main purpose of any Phase 2 study is to place a value on the private utilities' local assets. That valuation has 2 parts, but this study will only deliver one: DTE's physical assets, the poles, wires, transformers, substations, but not the intangibles, which may be equal or even greater in value. These include stranded costs, which is leftover DTE generation, if any, and going concern, which is customer goodwill and the value of DTE's franchise. Sorry, I'm getting wonky here. The important thing is that this study will leave the public with no idea what municipalization will cost, as Mr. Woodring pointed out. Yes, the words stranded costs, going concern, and franchise value are in the RFP, but staff has stated, and you've told us in meetings, that there will be no valuation. Instead, there will be a, quote, cafeteria of numbers, approach agnostic. We've heard 2 reasons for not costing intangibles. One, because only the court can decide this. Strictly speaking, that's correct, but a thorough legal and economic analysis would give us a good idea. The FERC stranded cost rule runs 783 pages, not including updates. Precedent cases should be carefully analyzed by a strong legal team. They can report confidentially. And while there is little precedent for pricing a perpetual utility franchise valuation is not a black art. Standard methods exist. We can use them. The second reason we've been told for not valuing intangibles is that a valuation will lock us in once we're in court. The other speakers have addressed this. With all due respect, it doesn't make any sense to me. When you start a condemnation proceeding, you make an offer. If the other party doesn't agree, you go to court. But it all begins with your offer. Everyone accepts that the judge's dollar figure could diverge from yours. But you start out making the best and most defensible argument possible. This study will not do that. So it won't give our lawyers, or more importantly, the public, the information they need. Voters won't be able to rationally decide in 2026 when the time comes to vote on this issue. These problems are easy to fix. Exactly a month ago, we sent you some common sense RFP amendments. Please adopt them or equivalent ones. It's not too late to make this a proper study.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brian Geiringer. Thank you.
Hello, Mayor, Council, Administrator, and Clerk. My name is Brian Geringer. I am the Executive Director of Ann Arbor for Public Power. I am come here to speak on the same issue as Mr. Garber, Woodring, and Higgins. Hard to follow them up because they've done a great job laying all this out, but I'll add a little bit. I do want to thank you for allowing me to make public comment and for all your serious work on the project of municipalization. We are here in the midst of 2 100-year hurricanes hitting the country one after the other. As we know, ever-accelerating production of greenhouse gases in our country and around the world have led to better and better conditions for extreme weather. The warming oceans have led to Milton, Helene, Katrina, Maria, and the destabilization of our climate has led to disaster after disaster, like the Great Winter Storm in Texas a couple years ago. Despite our relative safety among the Great Lakes, only a fool would think that disaster is not coming for us as well. Just look at Asheville, North Carolina, 330 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, 2,100 feet above sea level, almost entirely destroyed by Hurricane Helene. To divest from fossil fuels in this moment is a path toward regaining our collective sanity. Ann Arbor has committed to doing so and is very valiant for this effort. One of the cornerstone goals of the 820 plan is zero carbon emissions from electricity by 2030, and one that can be reached if and only if we unplug from DTE and set up a public power utility within the city, one that can choose to divest from DTE's dirty energy and purchase power from and incentivize the creation of renewable sources instead. But regardless of what happens with the climate, getting rid of DTE is also absolutely critical for a second reason. When the climate catastrophe comes to Southeast Michigan, the difference between DTE grid reliability, ranking in the bottom 5 of the nation, and that of Treetown Power, our eventual public electric utility, is the difference between dozens, hundreds, or thousands of lives. It is that serious, and I think the evidence backs that up. Now is the moment to show seriousness about these issues by ensuring that the second feasibility study on municipalization includes the necessary legal analysis so that this can be the last feasibility study before we initiate the municipalization process. On this handout, you'll see that the overwhelming majority, as others have mentioned, the overwhelming majority of unknown valuation from the phase 1 study is due to unknown legal costs, specifically going concern. We've also seen that the high-end estimates are without strong logical backing, but regardless, it makes no sense to conduct an entire second feasibility study without attempting to clear up this largest unknown. I'm going to skip ahead a bit and just say the inclusion of the proper legal analysis in the phase 2 study would come at a relatively small cost. It's not too late, and would have a vastly outside benefit to our city's future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ralph McKee.
Good evening, Ralph McKee, Ward 5. I'm speaking tonight array proposals C and D. I'll start with this. The National Democratic Party slogan I saw today on a Harris sign was unity over division, hope over fear, truth over lies. Big tent, inclusive, but not here. Your campaign opposing the proposals is divisive fear-mongering fueled by lies. You say supporters of the proposals are conservatives and Republicans. I'm not. None of the people that signed my petitions I circulated are, and neither are the vast majority of supporters. So that's a divisive lie. Just like calling Kamala Harris a Marxist. Jen Iyer said that leaders are former council members who are Republicans or voted with Republicans. I know you don't like Elizabeth Nelson, but she's not a Republican. There haven't been a Republican on council for years. Prop C is simple. Replace low turnout primaries with high turnout nonpartisan general elections, in particular to have more students vote. But you say Prop C is intended to and could result in a Steth extremist winning. Junk. Anyone running who has any Republican connections, even from the past, will be outed immediately by multiple mailers and will have no chance. Look at what happened to Jane Lum in 2020. Do the math. Since our electorate is less than 15% Republican, for them to win, at least 6 Dems would have to run, all getting exactly 14%. The odds of that are minuscule. That's scare tactics. Then you say, Prop C has no runoffs. How horrible. Somebody could win by plurality. Well, that's happened in our current system. In 2022, Dharma Ackman won by a plurality in a tight race over Nelson. Who knows what would have happened in a runoff? Where were all the screams about runoffs then? It would have happened in Ward 5, too, that year until Reingans dropped out. It's happened a couple other times in 30 elections over the past 12 years. Big deal. That's a minor issue. Where were all the critics when Mayor Taylor vetoed a nonpartisan proposal with runoffs in 2020? And your faction sustained that veto, mostly silent. Jen Iyer seeks to deflect now by saying she sponsored ranked choice voting in 2021. Well, it looks like RCV isn't a priority for the establishment Dems in the state houses. We might wait a long time. You don't care. The system's great for you. The hypocrisy is palpable. Given the total dominance of the Dems here, the argument that the D on the ballot provides valuable info has no merit. Every viable candidate will be a Democrat. The remaining argument I've seen is that the proposals are barriers to candidates with diverse backgrounds. Now we're into Orwellian doublespeak. Prop C is no barrier, and Prop D is designed specifically to tear down a money barrier by providing funding help for grassroots candidates who aren't backed by the big money machine. That argument's really weak. I don't have time tonight to get into Prop D, but given the weak arguments you've made on Prop D, you don't have any credibility anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Dish.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I want to relay a message from Derek Miller, who is the Executive Director of the Community Action Network, which is one of the organizations that's supported with our the rebate that we get from the Community Public Health and Safety Millage. Sorry. CAN works in partnership with food gatherers, and it turns out that they are now serving double the food they did 2 years ago, which is to say that they have twice as much food, which is great, but they have 4 times as many people participating in their food distribution programs. And so that means that the participants are getting on average about half as much food per household as compared to 4 years ago. You should know that the Bryant Market, which is in the Bryant Community Center, operated by CAN, had to close every Tuesday in September because it didn't have enough food to serve. So if you are in a position to help out, they rely on donations of Myers gift cards to close the gap between food supply and demand, and you can do that donation the same way that you would donate money. You buy the cards, you take them to CAN, and they will give you a receipt for your taxes if those are useful to you. I often hear from people when I'm knocking doors, which I'm doing a lot of right now, that they wish that we were doing more and could do more to support people who are in precarious economic situations. So here's one small thing that many of us, not all of us, but many of us can do. And finally, I would like to say what a happy time I had last weekend at the gallery of the Ann Arbor Art Center, thanks to Councilmember Jen Cornell and her colleagues, at the exhibition of the photographs of Pete Souza, who was White House photographer for President Ronald Reagan and President Barack Obama and his family. And there are pictures from Pete Souza's work on the Obamas.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. I'm glad that a public commenter brought up ranked choice voting tonight, because it reminded me that just this morning I was listening to the MERS Monday podcast, MERS being the Michigan Information, I forget what it stands for, but it's just MERS. It's one of the 2 organizations that cover the legislative landscape and politics and everything in Michigan. And Michigan Information and Research Service. Anyway, you can listen to the MERS Monday podcast without a subscription to MERS. And today they talked to the 2 activists who are behind Rank My Vote, which is a new effort. It's the same folks who brought us redistricting, independent redistricting in Michigan, and now they're looking at bringing ranked choice voting to the state via a ballot initiative. So they're still in the information gathering stage and talking to communities across the state about what they're looking for and what the priorities would be in terms of how it's set up. Is there a primary? Is there not a primary? Is it partisan? Is it nonpartisan? All of those sorts of things. But they did give a shout out to Ann Arbor for already passing it and talked about it being a priority to help us as a city implement ranked choice voting as we envision it here. So we have been, of course, lobbying for the change with our state legislators since passing and putting it in our charter in 2021. But this could be a new effort that could really move the needle and get us where we need to be in terms of implementing ranked choice voting here. And that is a voter reform, an election reform that I think would be worth something, not Proposal C, which gets rid of a primary altogether and turns our council elections into a big November free-for-all. Thank you.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Cornell.
Thank you. I know family calendars get busy, so I want to make sure to mention this as an opportunity that our downtown community-wide trick-or-treat is on Sunday, October 27th, 11:30 to 2:30 p.m. A lot of the businesses downtown will be participating. It's a free community event. You can bring your family down. It's extremely family-friendly. Obviously, costumes are highly encouraged, as it is a Halloween treat, and it's a really good chance, I will say, as a mom, to get coats on your kids on Halloween if they've come a few days before and realize that going without their coat is not going to work for them on Halloween night. So that might be a pain saver for other moms out there. But it's something that the downtown merchants and businesses really look forward to doing to contribute to our community and to bring people downtown. So October 27th, Sunday, 11:30 to 2:30, please come and join us and enjoy trick-or-treating as a preview for the main event.
Councilmember Song.
Ann Arbor hosted an amazing fundraiser in support of Congresswoman Debbie Dingell yesterday, with our governor here in support, as well as Congressman Jim Clyburn from South Carolina. All three powerhouse advocates came to Ann Arbor specifically to speak to how essential it is to be a Democrat in the city and preserve not only Congresswoman Dingell's space in Congress, but help her bring friends in Michigan to do this good work. I think it's important to remember that it's probably not a good time to throw away our party labels, considering how consequential a number of races are in this state. In the state legislature, we only have a majority of one. And if you look at the reproductive health work and how it was held up in committee by one Democrat, there was a point where I actually had called the Speaker of the House and said, I'm coming to Lansing in my uterus costume. I need this. I would love to see this move out of committee. So yes, the tent is wide, but there are better Dems who can see the work come through. And I am so proud of Ann Arbor for stepping up to that challenge to not only help our own city, but our neighbors and the state, and hopefully, if things go well next month, help our country go in an even better direction.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to address the people that have come from Ann Arbor for Public Power tonight, and just, I've read the emails that have come in, I've listened to your comments tonight, I've looked at the RFP versus kind of your marked up version of what it should say, and I have to say I struggle to find what the gap is between the current RFP and what is being suggested. I really do, because I see the stranded costs being addressed in here. I see the going concern. And I agree with you. I don't want to see us pay for another study after this. And voters do need to be informed about the potential cost. And furthermore, I understand that the first study gave us a very large range that would be unhelpful, which is why we need this next step. But I really feel that the RFP was responsive to all of the public input that we got, including from your group. And again, as I read your marked up version versus what we have, I don't see a big gap. I don't see the gap. So just wanted to address that and appreciate your comments and your engagement on this issue.
Further discussion, further communication. We have before us the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Cornell, second by Councilmember Iyer. Prior to discussing the consent agenda, I believe we have a staff introduction for CA6.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Kennedy should be there to address that.
He is.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. So this is for the video wall for the EOC. We've been juggling several different vendors for this, and so this is just an oversight that the wrong quote got submitted to council at the last meeting. So this was the one that was intended to go forward. There was a question on the disparity between the two prices. A large part of this is the software that drives it. One of the most notable ones is with us building a new EOC, wanted to basically have as much functionality as possible, knowing that this was kind of a one-shot opportunity for us to have this. So there is some additional hardware costs. There's a significant support network because we're going to have to create the talent in-house for us to be able to drive this between emergency management, police and fire, for our staff to be able to use this, and knowing that trying to build that support network over the first couple years of this is going to be very necessary. And then also the ability for us getting into this, numerous data inputs, and that we can basically kind of create, part of this is going to have a screen wall, and us to have total customization of how we want this to do. The lower price was kind of basically you could show stuff on individual screens. This would allow you to either have one image, full wall, or multiple images of various sizes. It would also allow us, if need be, for members such as Council or the Mayor, you would be able to remote in and actually see what we were seeing too. The previous version would not allow that, or that option one, I would say, would not allow that. And also two, someone remotely could also display into the EOC. So yes, it's a significant cost, an error on our part, and I apologize about that. There's several of us, myself included, that should have caught that. Again, we're juggling 4 different vendors on this, and also with use of the funding, trying to move this as quick as possible, and that just kind of caused us to need to regroup on things. So my apologies for that, but hopefully that provides the context of the delta. So thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion of the consent agenda? Councilmember Harrison.
I'd like to pull CA 11.
CA 11. Further discussion of the consent agenda? Councilmember Medina.
I was going to speak on CA 11, so I will hold that now for that, but I would like to just express my excitement to see CA 4, which is the resolution to improve the construction contract for geothermal design and installation at the Bryant Community Center. This is work that we've been doing in the Bryant neighborhood, and at the center they've been an incredible partner to our Office of Sustainability and Innovation in leading the city in some of our work, and I think this is going to be a really great demonstration project for how we can continue to expand geothermal across the city and continue to make sustainable energy the normal here in Ann Arbor.
I'd like to pile on to that as well, and just say that I'm grateful for the great and good work done by OSI in connection with expanding the geothermal and its focus, of course, on the Bryant district. This, it would be an opportunity lost, were I not to mention that the geothermal districts and the implementation of geothermal is exactly the sort of work, the incremental work that the sustainable energy utility, sort of a first step with respect to municipalization, would be able to accomplish were the voters to pass it in November. This is, of course, Proposal A, and the geothermal sort of work being done at Bryant, that integrated work, is the sort of thing that the SEU, were it realized, would be able to support. Further discussion of the consent agenda? All in favor? Well, with the exception of CA 7. Let me say that again. All in favor of the consent agenda with the exception of CA 11? Please say aye. Opposed? The consent agenda, with the exception of CA 11, is approved with 11 council members present, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to none of them. CA11, resolution to approve a community-based crisis response pilot grant contract with the Michigan State Police to accept a grant in the amount of $483,000 and to appropriate funding of $603,750. Moved by Councilmember Harrison, seconded by Councilmember Radina. Discussion, please, of C11. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that we have a staff intro, but before that staff intro happens, I would like to thank staff for their tireless efforts in working with, basically working to shore up this contract and make sure that it aligns with our values here in the city of Ann Arbor and with this council. I do have a few questions. They might be a little bit redundant because I submitted quite a few agenda item questions, but for the purpose of those that are watching and have not had the opportunity to read the agenda item questions, I do have a few, but...
Is there a staff member able to answer questions? Mr. Dehoney?
I'm here for that, Mayor.
All right. Councilor Harrison.
Okay. So the first question I have is, I'd like to know how long and how many months did staff spend negotiating this contract with Michigan State Police, roughly?
Roughly, we went back and forth, I would say about 5 months to multiple meetings in order to find a resolution. We're very grateful for the continuous efforts of Representative Morgan, who participated with us in a number of the sessions. We, at one point, didn't think we would be able to get successfully through negotiations, but are very pleased that we were ultimately able to achieve that. And to your point, Councilmember Harrison, land with grant language that's consistent with the values of the City Council.
Thank you. Can I ask another?
You've got 50 seconds.
Okay. All right. Can staff clarify how they ensured the privacy protections for residents were prioritized during the drafting of the agreement with the Michigan State Police?
There are, well, first, it is appropriate to say that in meeting with state officials, including attorneys from the state, and again, Representative Morgan's office was present during the final negotiation, there is no intent from the state to do any kind of records review that would invade the privacy of Ann Arbor residents. From a technical standpoint, we will have the ability to redact anything that should not be reviewed. We are proposing to use a software that would enable us to do that. We also have the opportunity to review with the naked eye what the records are saying before they are made available for inspection. And just to make clear for the public, the grant itself is going to enable us to bring 2 additional social workers into supportive connections to further the work of that office. The grant rules allow for supporting a new program or an existing program, and that is what we intend to do.
Further discussion of CA 11. Councilmember Harrison, you're back on.
Thank you, Administrator Dehoney. My next question is, what steps have staff taken, or have they taken steps to ensure that the crisis response program will be aligned with community values and expectations, especially in terms of minimizing law enforcement involvement?
The creation of an unarmed response initiative is something that we are working on right now from the ground up. We are In the information gathering phase, we've indicated that it's more important for us to be right about what is brought forward versus to do it with quickness. We are looking at different models that are operational around the country. In fact, I will be traveling to Durham, North Carolina in a few weeks to visit a program there that dispatches 3-person teams for people who are in crisis. That includes EMTs, a clinician, and a peer support professional. We do not intend to bring forward an initiative that is run by the police department. However, in full transparency, what we are seeing in other places is there are times, perhaps, when a co-response model in other cities is being utilized.
20 seconds.
Thank you. Last question. What resources or support will staff provide to ensure smooth coordination between departments, community partners, and the crisis response team?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last question?
What resources of support will staff provide to ensure smooth coordination between departments, community partners, and the crisis response team?
We are in collaboration and discussion with multiple stakeholders in the community. We have a discussion that is being scheduled right now that would involve the city in discussion with the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. We are also going to have representation and actually the CEO of Michigan Medicine to help us think through the best approach for us to take in Ann Arbor. And the last point I'll make is any model that we are considering would be brought in front of City Council for a full discussion and to be held up in the light of day for the community to see before we enact anything.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to speak briefly about this long process that we just heard about. And I think also to just express to the community how much thought and work went into this. Obviously, you hear some of the questions that Councilmember Harrison was asking, and we heard that staff was working with state leaders on this for up to 5 months. This is a grant of nearly $500,000 to invest in community crisis-based response programs, and it's money that came out of the Michigan State Police budget. It's money that otherwise would be going into the Michigan State Police traditional work, and this was money that State Representative Morgan was able to work at the state level to ensure that we could invest back into our community, into the type of values-based policing that we want to see here in our community and other communities around the state. My understanding is that other communities didn't ask nearly as many questions as we did, and they pretty much just accepted this money as it came in the door. But we had a lot of questions about it because we wanted to make sure that it met our community's values and that we were able to do with it what we see is appropriate in terms of community-based crisis response rather than what the state police would want us to spend this money on. And so I just want to express my gratitude to staff who did go back and forth with Michigan State Police and in partnership with State Representative Morgan and his office for a period of 5 months to make sure we got this to a place where we could invest it, where we feel it will do good work here in our community. And I also just really want to express my gratitude to State Representative Morgan. And this is a great example of how important it is to have elected leaders at the state level who will go to bat for their communities and who will continue working alongside them. He didn't just get this money for our community, but then he and his staff continued to join those meetings with our staff and Michigan State Police to negotiate the details for the entirety of that time. And so I know that this started with former Deputy City Administrator John Fournier being in those meetings, and then ultimately Mr. Mahoney got involved himself after John took another role outside of the city. It went through multiple staff members in Jason's office, and so there was a lot of time, work, and energy that went into this, and so I am grateful that we've gotten to this place and just want to thank everyone involved so that we can invest this into our community-based crisis response programs. Thanks.
Councilmember Watson.
Councilmember Radina gave some really good background, and that's partly because this item came to the Council Administration Committee a couple times, and so myself and members of that committee were able to ask some questions and give some feedback. And I think the important thing that I want the community to know about this program is this grant, while it comes from the Michigan State Police, it is not a program designed by the Michigan State Police. This will supplement an existing program, as Administrator Mahoney said, but Supportive Connections is a program designed by Ann Arbor for Ann Arbor, and the reports I've heard from the community, the fact that social workers are able to help people where they are, whether that's staying in the Ann Arbor, staying near the Delana Center, or staying or immediately upon exit from jail or the criminal justice, even in courtrooms, I've heard from judges, our social workers are providing that support. So this grant money is really truly meeting that. It is truly community designed, and it would be a misnomer to think of it as an extension of the police. And I really appreciate all the work from staff, and also the work of State Rep Morgan, because he understood what this program meant to the city, and the fact that we could not let this almost more than $500,000 go to waste. So thank you.
Further discussion? It's been said, but I'd like to, for whatever it's worth, extend considerable thanks to the state police, of course, for the grant in the outset, but then crucially to Representative Morgan specifically, and to his staff generally for their work that they have performed on behalf of the city of Ann Arbor and with our outstanding staff to get this over the finish line. It was a lot of work, but it was good work. And, we are, in Rep. Morgan, we're in good hands. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. We now come to a set of public hearings. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about a specific item on the agenda, that is to say, the specific subject matter of the public hearing. To speak at a public hearing, one need not have signed up in advance, but your speech must relate to the specific subject matter of the public hearing, that is to say, the agenda item to which the public hearing relates. Speakers in all instances, both here and online, will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk or the time clock will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Our first public hearing today is public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend section 5.16.3 and 5.17.7 of Chapter 55, Unified Development Code of Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone in-house who would like to speak at this public hearing? Is there anyone online who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Kirk Westfall, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Kirk Westfall, 3505 Charter Place. Would like to address the bundle of amendments that you are considering tonight having to do with TC1. This is something that I've been interested, in for years, but starting 6 months ago in response to a proposal down at State and Eisenhower, staff and Planning Commission have been wrestling over some of these proposed tweaks to TC1, some of which I think are warranted, a couple of which I think would be a mistake. One has to do with loosening the restrictions on curb cuts, the number of curb cuts allowed. And while I can appreciate the instinct to make a citywide standard, I think transit corridors are and should be treated, specially, given that we're putting so much investment into these corridors and making it possible for people to live without cars, and particularly Vision Zero. I think increasing the number of curb cuts to sort of dumb it down to what's the existing citywide standard would be a mistake, and that if anything, we should leave this in place and raise the standard for TC for the rest of the city to match TC1. It's a common complaint that there's too many curb cuts in our existing corridors, and here we have a chance to make sure that they're consolidated. I think but perhaps the most alarming part of the changes has to do with the building frontage requirement. It's currently at 70%. This kind of matches what I've seen in the literature. It's considered best practice. It appeared that this was a bit of a challenge with the Oxford proposal, given that they wanted to put in some plazas and so on, and perhaps that can be looked at where either through the ZBA or through tweaking the standard to allow maybe for some limited public areas, although those are really challenging to do. Perhaps this could be ratcheted down a tiny bit, but I'm kind of confused as to why the proposal would be to dispatch with building frontage requirements altogether, given the fact that this could allow very low density, just kind of
30
two-story
seconds.
buildings to be oriented not to the street, but sort of internally with a large parking lot the size of the building lining the street, which sort of defeats the whole purpose of walkability and safety and pedestrian orientation. So I would request that you have Planning Commission take a close look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this public hearing?
Mayor, I don't have any other callers online.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, an ordinance to amend section 5.18, 5.22, 5.29, and 5.37 of Chapter 55, Unified Development Code of Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone in-house who would like to speak at this public hearing? Is there anyone online who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Mayor, I don't have any callers online for this hearing.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 3, an ordinance to amend Chapter 102, Home Energy Rating Disclosure of Title 8. Is there anyone in-house who would like to speak at this public hearing? Come on up.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, city administrator, city clerk. My name is Todd Waller. I'm a co-broker with At Properties Christie's International Real Estate located at 912 North Main Street. In my 22 years as a real estate professional responsible for assisting a fair number of Ann Arbor citizens move into and out of the city, the last 6 months of the Home Energy Rating Disclosure Ordinance, HERD, being implemented has been a challenge. I'm here tonight to add my opinion to the proposed changes to the 6-month-old HERD ordinance, agenda items, public hearing 3 and B-3. With an ordinance this young and the city demanding adoption for nearly all residential real estate sales, it is premature to tinker with the execution of this ordinance. There's been a grace period between when the ordinance was put into effect and when fines would be assessed. Within that time, it has become apparent that the city has not effectively communicated what it expects of its home sellers. As a fiduciary to our sellers, it's incumbent upon the realtor to advise our sellers in all aspects of the sale of their Ann Arbor home. This includes the HERD report. In speaking with Ann Arbor home sellers, they're not aware of the HERD requirement independent of the realtor they've chosen to work with. For the city to get larger citizen adoption of this ordinance and meet its A20 goals for zero carbon emissions, working with the realtor community is key. There are two changes in particular that I believe to be a problem with swiftly implementing the HURD ordinance. My first concern is with the changes to Section 8396(1)(b)(2), changes to how a seller is required to provide a HURD report to a potential purchaser of their home. The language being that the, quote, seller shall provide a copy of the home energy score report to all prospective buyers who visit the dwelling while it is publicly listed for sale at the time of the visit, end quote. How is the city going to confirm that this was accomplished? Will there be a staff member at each listing for each showing to a buyer? The second change I'm concerned with is in Section 8396(1)(c), eliminating one method of compliance that is currently acceptable. For 6 months, realtors have been advised that uploading a copy of the HURD report on behalf of their seller to the property listing in the multiple listing system and providing a screenshot of the upload was sufficient to prove compliance. So the training we've been receiving for 6 months will now be made obsolete, and the level of compliance we had in those 6 months will inevitably go down as we change the compliance rules mid-adoption. A question I have asked since the beginning of the implementation of the HURD ordinance is, if the ordinance requires a report to be done before the time of listing for sale, and there's no way to confirm a buyer had a hard copy made available to them at the time of showing, a large concern I have is when exactly is the listing in violation? Is it at the time of listing, time of showing to a prospective buyer, or when the sale is completed? In conclusion, with the larger persistent question of when a seller is in violation of the ordinance, tweaking compliance with the ordinance after only a few months in place will have the adverse impact of making compliance levels drop, not increase. The local realtor organization has trained local brokerages and agents on the adoption of these practices. With adoption of these changes, that training will go out the window and compliance levels will decrease. I ask that council weigh the importance of allowing more time for both implementation and education of the HURD ordinance. I urge City Council to table these proposed changes to the HURD ordinance for at least 12 months from implementation to the original ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Kristen Mills, and I'm a realtor with Real Estate One in Ann Arbor. We're located at 555 Briarwood Circle. I've served the Ann Arbor area citizenry for 5 years now, and I'd like to add my opinion to the proposed changes to the 6-month-old HURD ordinance. I can appreciate that educating and implementing an ordinance like HURD can be like herding cats. Unfortunately, the city still has a long way to go to communicate what it expects of its home sellers, as there is still widespread confusion about this ordinance within the realtor and homeowner community. In order to be proactive, our area Board of Realtors has spent a lot of time and effort on educating our members on the HURD ordinance to help our sellers stay in compliance. For example, we hosted a lunch and learn with the Office of Sustainability last fall, and we have another one scheduled for next week on October 15th. Furthermore, many of our local brokerages have asked the Office of Sustainability to make a special visit to educate and answer questions. Most of the local brokerages also discuss implementing HURD at their weekly educational meetings. The point is, education and implementation takes time. It is extremely premature to make additional changes when we're still familiarizing our populace with the fact that this ordinance even exists, especially with what needs to be done for sellers to stay in compliance. Lastly, the city averages about 1,200 home sales per year. The National Association of Realtors, or NAR, estimates 93% of homes sold nationally are with a realtor. That means outside of the city, realtors end up being the primary educators for Ann Arbor sellers. Doesn't it make sense that we are consulted and involved in any proposed amendments made? We would welcome the opportunity to partner with council members in the Office of Sustainability for future modifications. Our goal would be to educate, streamline the report process, and eliminate gray areas to increase efficiency and effectiveness for this ordinance. Council members, if you are serious about increasing compliance with the HURD ordinance to help meet our A20 goals, I urge you not to make any changes at this time and instead partner with local realtors on any future proposed changes. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in House who would like to speak at this public hearing? Is there anyone online who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Mayor, I don't have any callers online.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 4, resolution to approve the 300 to 312 East Huron redevelopment brownfield plan. Is there anyone in-house who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Ken Garber, Second Ward again. I don't really think of this as a brownfield plan. A brownfield plan is when a developer tells a community, I'd like to build here, but this land is contaminated and my project isn't viable unless I get some help. Then we decide whether the benefits of the project are worth capping taxes or instead hold out for something better. In this case, construction is well underway right across the street. We don't have a choice, we're getting this hotel. Also, Equal normally reviews and approves the work plan. Not this time, no state oversight. So while you can do this under Act 381, and there was soil contamination, it's really not a brownfield plan in my view. It's a $750,000 city taxpayer bailout dressed up as a brownfield plan. Now, bailout might still make sense. I like this developer, Mr. Martin, and I want his hotel project to succeed. I know he's under a tremendous amount of pressure. He's taken on a lot of risk, and I sympathize. But if taxpayers are going to bail him out, he has to give a little something in return. Now, what might that be? Right now, the plan is to heat the hotel's common spaces 23,000 square feet by burning fossil gas. That's why OSI recommended site plan denial last year. There was a question whether DTE could serve an all-electric building, but those talks were several years ago. Since then, DTE has done a rebuild right here and should have capacity. So in return for $750,000 in lost tax revenue, we should ask Mr. Martin to go all-electric, as our 820 plan stipulates. Staff recommends approval, even though the project does not meet the city brownfield policy standard that site conditions must prevent a reasonable rate of return. Staff argues we should still grant the TIF, or we'll lose sustainability features like the efficient VTAC air conditioning units and rooftop solar. First of all, these features are nice, but they're unexceptional and do not offset gas combustion. Second, it's backwards reasoning, a form of self-extortion. We'd better pay or we'll lose what we have. Instead, let's ask this developer to step up and meet our city's climate standards. He wants a $750,000 bailout? No problem. Go all electric. Finally, you may know that the County Brownfield Authority approved this plan last August, contingent on city approval. But Authority member James Harless said this, quote, "It will be up to the city to see if it meets their standards for sustainability. That's really not our role," end quote. So the county put the ball in your court. This building doesn't meet OSI standard. You can do something about this tonight, or at least explore that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in house who would like to speak at this public hearing? Is there anyone online who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Mayor, I don't see any callers online.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. We have before us the regular session meeting minutes of September 16, 2024. May I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes? Moved by Councilmember Watson, seconded by Councilmember Ghazi Edwin. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? It's approved. B1, an ordinance to amend Section 5.16.3 and 5.17.7 of Chapter 55, Unified Development Code of Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion, please, of B1. Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. So this is a suite of amendments to TC1. I don't have time to address each one, but I want to focus on 2 or 3 that have generated some questions and concerns, as we heard earlier. So Planning Commission recommended approval of all of these. The guiding principle behind these changes come from Ann Arbor's recent economic development report, which emphasized to this body that very narrowly tailored development standards, whether they are in the UDC or in PUD requirements, are overly restrictive, often unnecessarily complicated, and generally increase the cost of development in the city. We might value such provisions if they achieved some strongly favored goal, but as we see how these restrictions affect project proposals on the ground, we are realizing this is not always necessarily the case. I think the approach that's exemplified in the revisions that we have before us is to take guidance from parts of town we consider to be pedestrian-friendly and service-rich. And we note that these do not always conform to the specific standards we have created for TC1. Moreover, in this circumstance, we have the benefit of a proposed development project that achieves many of the goals that we envisioned for the TC1 and has provided us a real-time project example that demonstrates the challenge with implementing some of our provisions. So the question of curb cuts, TC1 departs from the way we regulate curb cuts elsewhere in the city. It's restrictive because it assigns curb cuts by lot width, whereas elsewhere in the city, it is property frontage. In a case on TC1 where we might be developing a transit corridor that has vast parking lots, the restrictions that we've written into the TC1 ordinance could mean that there are only 2 curb cuts for an entire very large project because there are no streets in the project. The project was formerly a parking lot. When it is developed, they will have private roads running through it, but these will not count as streets. It has become apparent that limiting an exceptionally wide site to just 2 curb cuts is not realistic. So the current standard unintentionally encourages land divisions to divide a site into 250-foot wide lots to achieve a workable number of curb cuts. Staff feels that it is better overall, and Planning Commission agrees, to have a rate of curb cuts such as 1 curb cut for every 100, 200, or 600 feet, rather than a fixed number, regardless of size or length, which is what we currently have. So this proposal is to remove the TC1 specific standard and apply the same standard keyed to, lot width that, I'm sorry, yeah, right, I'm sorry. Sorry, I just completely messed that up. But anyway, we're going to remove the restricted standard and go with what holds in the rest of the city. I'm rushing because there's so many.
Councilmember?
I don't want to speak about building frontage unless I get another chance.
Well, Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. So as Councilmember Dish notes, although we are trying to address points of our code that are overly restrictive, we do want to keep elements that are central to our goals. So part of the stated intent of TC1, as part of our ordinance itself, is that pedestrian-friendly designs are critically important to the district. So like Mr. Westfall, who called in, I have some concerns with the bundle of proposed amendments. My concern is that when paired together, the modifications to TC1 are pretty drastic, and they're in conflict with some of the basic principles of walkability. So just drawing from the Congress of New Urbanism, they stress the importance of 1 small block size. They note that the average block size in a walkable place should be no more than 6 acres, preferably 2 to 3 acres or even smaller. Another element is that buildings should front the street. They note that this is Urbanism 101. Streets are humanized by buildings that form active urban frontages. We all know this. This is a key element of what we've been trying to work for within TC1. So the proposed amendments would, there's many of them, and some of them I completely support, but some of the ones that I don't are, they would eliminate the requirement to break up large sites into blocks, and they would also eliminate building frontage requirements. They also allow for slightly larger buildings, more curb cuts, as Councilmember Dish was mentioning. Those latter changes are modifications, but the first 2 ones are actually just pure eliminations. So I have a few questions for staff, if I could. I think Ms. Alexis is going to respond to a few things. Thank you. So starting with building frontage, the amendments propose to completely remove building frontage requirements, going from 70% to no requirement for building frontage. Yet the 70% frontage requirement, I assume that was initially suggested because it's very consistent with best practices, looking at the Form-Based Code Institute. There's a recommendation of 80% frontage for urban centers, 60% in an urban zone. The Michigan Municipal League redevelopment guidelines were developed in partnership with the Congress for New Urbanism recommends 70% frontage. So I guess my question is, why would we want to permit less than what is best practice?
I recognize that there is a recommendation when you have form-based codes to have a 70% building frontage, but that has proven to be difficult. This one particular project, our only project that is under review right now, has proven to be a little bit difficult. There was a request to adjust the frontage requirement by petition. And we looked at it, and we looked at existing downtown blocks. We looked at blocks outside of downtown. We presented to the Planning Commission that if you're keeping a building frontage standard, you can probably go down to 60%. 60 or 70% does seem appropriate if you're going to have a building frontage standard. But we also found that places that were developed without a building frontage standard, but with minimum and maximum front setbacks, and with building sizes, maximum diagonals, that those places, they may not meet the 60 or 70% building frontage standard, but the development is very pedestrian friendly, still very friendly to pedestrians. And so it seemed that without a building frontage standard, we can still achieve our goals, and that more requirements in the UDC may not necessarily give better results. Less requirements seem to achieve the same desired outcomes, and we put it forth to the Planning Commission, and they recommended an ordinance that removes the building frontage standard.
Further discussion? Perhaps Dish, then Watson?
I'll wait until everybody else has spoken, had a first turn.
Councilmember Watson.
Ms. DeLeo, I think one of the goals of the frontage standard was potentially to place parking behind the buildings so that they could be accessed from a pedestrian coming on a sidewalk directly into the building from the street, rather than maybe having to walk through a big parking lot to get to the building. Is there something within the TC1 standard that would still prohibit a number of parking spaces in front of the building before that portion of street access, or does this allow for some of that?
A couple things address this. It is already in our code right now. It doesn't matter in or out of the TC1 district. Parking is prohibited in the front yard. Front yard is defined as between the building and the front lot line. Parking must go to the side or rear of the building anyway, all districts. The only exception would be if you're on a corner lot, and then you meet that standard on one of the fronts. And in the TC1 district, as in many districts, we have a maximum front setback. Buildings must go up near the street, closer in the TC1 district than other districts. So that distance between the pedestrian and the front door of a building remains unchanged, even without a building frontage requirement. This building frontage requirement speaks to the width of a building and how much you develop across the site. It does not speak to the depth. So even without this standard, this does not impact how far back a building is set from the property line. And the TC1 district remains the size limitation on a parking lot. Parking lots are sized in proportion to whatever buildings are proposed. And the site basically has to be covered, cannot be covered more with parking than with buildings. That's a unique feature of the TC1 district, and that does remain. It is possible without the building frontage requirements, or even with them, because they are currently set at 70%, that you can get a parking lot next to a building, but the distance between the sidewalk and the front door remains unchanged, and the TC1 district does have that size limitation that I mentioned. So the parking lot is not going to be the dominant feature or so large that you cannot cross it horizontally.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ackman.
I'd like to ask a question about the curb cuts issue, which is a point well taken. We know that curb cuts increases conflicts between pedestrians, people biking, and traffic. And my understanding as I read this is that we were trying to create a single standard across rather than having a special one for TC1. But I guess I'm not really understanding why we wouldn't bring the curb cut standards to be more in line with TC1 as it exists now, rather than deferring to what seems like an outmoded standard for the number of curb cuts.
I hear you. Although I would not say that our current standards citywide are, the philosophy or the concept is now not outmoded. I think the key principle here is the TC1 district has a fixed number. It says very small sites, 250 feet in lot width, get one curb cut, period. And that is fine. That is a little bit in line with what smaller sites get currently. But it says for sites larger than 250 feet in lot width, you get two, period. There is no rate there. I think the key piece that the TC1 district is missing is the rate, and that there is no recognition for a significant amount of frontage. We have sites that might, so what this means is if a site is a half a mile wide, in the 2,000 some frontage, it still only gets two curb cuts. You can't build this, if you would wanted to, you can't build a street grid with that. It just gets two. There's no rate. And so I think the key piece for here is we would like to introduce a rate, and then rather than build upon and complicate with different rates, let's just use the same rate as that we do the rest of the city. We can discuss what the rate might be and build a specific one for TC1, but as staff, we do recognize that it's a failure of the district not to have a scale or flexibility at all. A rate is important because site sizes are different.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
It's so hard to think and take notes at the same time, but I did just want to say, I think that Ms. DeLeo has really very, very clearly explained what we can achieve without a building frontage standard. But I also wanted to mention that if we look at our downtown, this was what was persuasive at Planning Commission, was the staff presentation with slides and pictures of different places downtown and what the building frontages were. So Zingerman's event space is 100% frontage. That might not be your favorite place to walk in the city, although it's definitely not the worst. The entirety of Liberty Street between South First and South State, which is one of the nicest walks in the city, the total building frontage is 84%. Good examples in the examples that is shown in the staff presentation that's attached to our agenda and that was given to Planning Commission show that good examples range from 40 to 100%. So I don't think the question is whether we don't care about street frontage. I think the question is whether we need a building frontage standard in order to get the kind of walkable scenario that we want. And again, I really want us to remember that we all signed off on and were delighted to receive an economic development report that told us that we make things too complicated, that complicated is not always good, but that complicated is always expensive.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree, there are elements where I do think that we should be simplifying. I think there are other places where we want to hold true to our values. As you noted, so one of the best spots in the downtown is 84% frontage, that's greater than the 70% what we have in there. I could imagine a modification where we were saying, okay, let's create a little bit of flexibility here, let's do 60%, but what's in the staff presentations, Arbor Hills Crossing is a building frontage of 44% on Washtenaw. That was great when at the time when that development went in, because it was so much different than what we had seen in the past. But I don't think that today that we would call that what we're aspiring to. I think we're aspiring to something better than someplace like Arbor Hills. Another question that I have, because I think I'm getting a little bit confused around the removal for the rationale behind removing the requirement to break large sites into blocks, because this seems to rest primarily on the fact that staff believes it's duplicative because there's already a cap on the overall size of buildings. But I think that my understanding is that buildings function differently than city blocks. And so I was hoping maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the rationale for removing that requirement to break up larger sites into blocks. Thanks.
Sure. The request was that the petition said, you would say that you have to break up sites into blocks. Can you please define the blocks? So the request was to add a block. And in attempting to then define what we mean by blocks, we realized that we are running afoul and complicating matters with our limitations on number of curb cuts and with our building frontage requirements. We are saying that buildings can only be so wide, but they also need to span the entire lot width because of the frontage requirement. But you can't put streets in the middle of things because we limit the number of curb cuts. And we realize that we are inherently going to get sort of block development by limiting the size of buildings. What we are saying to developers is you can have a lot of buildings on your site, but all of them have to be relatively small, 250 feet or 300 feet wide. They need to be up near the street because we have maximum front setbacks. And just with those regulations alone, we're going to get the cadence and rhythms and the placements that we want. The block requirement does not play nicely with a frontage requirement either. Again, as I mentioned, we're saying that you have to fill up your entire frontage, but also break it up into blocks and have space for circulation in between. And because we felt that just saying break it up into blocks without any supporting standards or dimensions or definitions or articulation, it's not really adding anything except words. We can remove that line from the code and still get block style development with the remaining standards. That was our rationale.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with me.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Iyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackman?
No.
Councilmember Briggs?
No.
Councilmember Cornell?
No.
Councilmember Dish?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrison?
Yes.
Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
No.
Councilmember Redina?
Yes.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
B2, an ordinance to amend Section 5.18, 5.22, 5.29, 5.37 of Chapter 55, Unified Development Code for Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Redina, second by Councilmember Dish. Discussion, please, at B2. Councilmember Redina.
Thank you, Mayor. Others may have noticed this as well. There are a few minor technical glitches in some of the section numbers throughout the ordinance. And so while the ordinance itself remains largely clear and understandable, I would like to move to postpone so that the public can see the ordinance with those rectified on the advice of our city attorney.
Is postponed to?
Our next meeting.
Seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion of the postponement. I'm assuming city attorney advisor. Anyway, all in favor? Opposed? It is postponed. B3, ordinance to amend Chapter 102, Home Energy Rating Disclosure of Title 8. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Cornell. Discussion, please, of B3. Councilmember Dish.
I would like to move to amend this item. I sent the amendment earlier to City Clerk Beaudry. Could you forward my, thank you.
Perhaps describe the amendment?
I can, sorry, all right. So I move to strike 8:396 1.b.2. And so if you did that, the amended item would read, seller home energy rating disclosure requirements, 1, in connection with the public listing of any real property described in Section 394 for sale, the seller shall A, obtain a home energy score report from a home energy assessor prior to the public listing, B, this is the key place, provide a copy of the home energy score report to 1, all licensed real estate agents working on the seller's behalf, and 2, the director prior, that means the director of OSI, prior to or at the time of the public listing. So it would no longer read that all prospective buyers who visit the dwelling while it is publicly listed for sale at the time of the visit should be provided a copy of the home energy score report.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Cornell. Councilmember Dish, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much. Council recognizes the need for and are grateful for the partnership of realtors in implementing this HERD ordinance, and we understand that it is a change for them. It's been a consequential change for them. So removal of the requirement to provide the report at the time of the visit responds to concerns raised by realtors. We heard further concerns that the changes in Section 83961C would fully eliminate one method of compliance that is currently acceptable. I don't see that, so someone would need to clarify that for me. The rest of the changes in the red line documents clarify but do not change the requirements. It has always been the case that the report must be shared with a real estate agent, shared with OSI, and posted so that it is available to members of the public on at least one public real estate listing, and it must remain posted for the duration of the home being on the market. So that nothing has changed there. It is simply clarified that it must always be there and that it must be publicly available. I hope you'll support the amended version.
Further discussion of the amendment. Is the amendment friendly to the body? Amendment is friendly. Further discussion of the main motion as amended. For my part, I'm grateful for the conversations which have gone on to date with respect to the HERD ordinance. I think it's an important and crucial step forward that we do ask our sellers to identify for potential buyers the nature of their home energy rankings. It's highly useful information, and it is of course too useful for sellers to understand what they're selling, and for buyers to understand what they're buying. This is, I think, a great good, and I'm glad that we are moving forward. Further, with respect to the articulation, as Councilmember Dish has indicated, in my view, these are not wholesale changes, but rather are changes in the vein of clarifications and removals of potential loopholes. For example, the posting of a HERD score in a listing for one day and then the immediate withdrawal of the HERD score on the next day, ensuring that it's clear that that's not a form of compliance. I appreciate that we are in early days with respect to the ordinance. This in my view, cuts both ways. The fact that this is still the subject of substantial education efforts means that changes that are affected here can be included in those education efforts, thereby increasing, I believe, the efficiency and spread of the home energy score disclosure. Councilmember Iyer.
I did just want to take a minute, appreciate the comments that were just made, and I'll keep mine pretty tailored to the commentary that we received, the public commentary. I do want to thank you for coming out tonight. Your perspective, of course, is as realtors is invaluable, and I'm only comfortable moving forward with this because I'm aware that the director of OSI has had a number of conversations with the Realtor Association about these changes, and really sat down and walked through and got feedback and tried to answer any questions. And I view that partnership as necessary as well. And I wouldn't be moving forward with this if I didn't feel like that feedback was sought and integrated. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C1, an ordinance to add a new section 9.155.1 of Chapter 112, Non-Discrimination of Title 9 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Gaziedwan, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion, please, of C1. Councilmember Gaziedwan.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to thank, everyone who has shared their stories both tonight and voiced their support during the last city council meeting as well. Over the past few weeks, I've engaged with several business associations to clarify questions, and I'm pleased to have received the endorsement of the Huron Valley AFL-CIO, which represents a diverse body of labor unions. Engaging all stakeholders in this conversation was vital to moving the legislation forward. I also want to express my gratitude to the Commission on Disability Issues and the Human Rights Commission for their collaboration in crafting both this resolution and the accompanying ordinance. Their efforts were instrumental in ensuring that the human rights and disability justice values underlying this initiative were effectively communicated. Finally, I would like to extend a personal thank you to Deputy City Attorney Margaret Radabaugh, who worked tirelessly to ensure we could proceed with this and bring it to council. With that, and after discussions with various stakeholders, I would like to make a motion to amend the current resolution. Clerk Beaudry, if you could forward that to my colleagues. Should I just go ahead?
Sure.
I would like to add the following resolved clause as the last resolved clause in the ordinance, or I'm sorry, the resolution.
We're on the ordinance.
Oh, never mind. Okay, this is retract the amendment.
All right. It has not been seconded, so I think you're clear.
Okay. So I'll just proceed in saying that I hope my colleagues can join me in supporting this tonight. We would end up being the first city in the state to enact the right to sit for all of our workers.
Further discussion of the amendment? Ordinance. Further discussion of the ordinance. Councilmember Watson.
So with all ordinances that come toward council, the question of enforcement becomes an important one. And the enforcement of the right to sit ordinance would resemble enforcement of the early leasing ordinance in the sense that people who feel that the ordinance isn't being observed can file a complaint to a city commission, in this case, the Human Rights Commission, with a form available online. The fact that HRC will follow up on the complaint and determine its legitimacy with the assistance of the city attorney's office gives an extra layer of review to these complaints. The city does not have labor inspection power, which is reserved to the state, so businesses don't have to worry about regular inspections to determine compliance, but for this reason, HRC is more likely to play a mediating role between business members and complainants. Discussion among HRC commissioners or members of the public will allow for common sense to come into the process, and also potentially allow for businesses to have an opportunity to observe the complainant's right to sit. As one of the liaisons to HRC, along with Councilmember Gaziedwan, I can vouch for the fact that the Commission is willing to take on this role. And I'd like to thank CM Gaziedwan and the co-sponsors for her leadership on this resolution. And as Ian Robinson, President of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation, said during last public comment, workers shouldn't be denied work that they can perform with accommodation. And I think it's as simple as that.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ackman.
I think, as I said last time, this was a topic that I did not know anything about until it appeared on our agenda. And so this was an opportunity for me to learn more about practices in the rest of the world. And, at first glance looking at this, I thought, well, what problem does this really solve? I'm not really aware of a problem that happens here. But I think, as I was reading about this, you kind of read, a practice becomes the way it is simply because that's how it always has been. And in Europe, they look on us as being strange for forcing cashiers to stand all day. They don't understand what we're doing. So just as an example of kind of cultural expectation that doesn't really have necessarily much to do with the job, was one that resonated a lot with me. So, I think that this is a good labor supportive policy, and just because we simply have always done it a certain kind of way doesn't mean we should continue to do it that way in the future. So I'll be supporting this.
Councilmember Cornell.
I just wanted to thank the State Street District, the Main Street Area Association, and Councilmember Ghazi Edwin, who in the interim from when this was on a previous council agenda took time to meet and discuss this, to provide additional information, have a chance to answer questions. I know that there is some trepidation by the business community, but I agree with my colleague that this is a no-brainer to me as well. And I appreciate that there will be an education process that goes around and is necessary and right for us to do as we get businesses not on board with this, but as enthusiastic about this as we are, and as enthusiastic as we heard from members of the public tonight. So that was an extra step that went, I think, a really long way to getting the business community feeling like they had a voice at this table in a way that was really respectful and meaningful to them. So I'm also supportive, and I'm grateful to my colleague for taking the time to do that.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C2, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55 zoning, rezoning of 1.66 acres from Ann Arbor Township designation TWP District to R1D Single Family Dwelling District, 3474 Huron River Drive rezoning. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Song. Discussion, please, of C2. All in favor? Opposed? It's approved. C3, an ordinance to amend Section 1120A of Chapter 9, City Seal and Flag of Title I of the City Code. Moved by Councilmember Dina, second by Councilmember Ghazi Edwin. Discussion, please, of C3. This, of course, is following up on the resolution of last meeting, or fairly recent vintage, identifying a new city flag. We are forging it here in ordinance. I look forward to a little bit of discussion, perhaps, or some guidance from city as to what constitutes use of the flag in a manner that is consistent with our ordinance. We all know that we want to unleash the flag to the public to enable it to serve as a symbol of municipal belonging and to enhance civic pride and membership. At the same time, of course, we want to make sure that the use of the flag does not create a false suggestion of affiliation or sponsorship. And so, that consistent usage will be useful for us to articulate. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C4, an ordinance to amend Section 117, Code Violation Citations of Chapter 1 of Title I of Section 8458 of Chapter 104, Energy and Water Benchmarking of Title 8. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Ghazi Edwin. Discussion, please, of C4. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C0, resolution to approve approval of issuance of new Class C quota liquor license in the city of Ann Arbor to Cella's Restaurant and Taqueria. Moved by Councilmember Medina, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion, please, of C0. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. CA 0. DC 0, sorry. Goodness. I've skipped so many different things.
I think you skipped the DCs.
Yes, I did skip the DSs. Goodness. All right. Well, Ms. Kaur, I pulled it up. No one stopped me. And we passed it.
That's quite all right.
Out of order.
You can return to DS1, and when you get to DC, I would redo DC 0.
And so we shall.
Thank you.
DS1 resolution, thank you. Resolution to approve the 300312 East Huron redevelopment brownfield plan. Moved by Councilmember Ackman, second by Councilmember Cornell. Discussion, please, of DS1. Councilmember Cornell.
So I wanted to reiterate some of what was said during public comment about this project. I do sit on the Brownfield Authority, and the board did discuss this proposed brownfield plan by developer First Martin. The TIF, the tax incremental financing that will be used to remediate pollution on the site is restricted to environmental activities only and is proportionally reimbursed with local millages only. The way that this project came up did not allow timing. The timing wasn't correct for it to allow submittal to the Act 381 work plan, which is why this is coming to council with contingent approval by the Brownfield Authority. This has come before the Brownfield Authority both in June and in August, and is contingent on city council approval. This is for a 6-story hotel right across the street from us. And a couple things I just wanted to make note is that a TIF is a commonly used economic development tool. These brownfield abatements are not excluded by this being in the Downtown Development Authority area, which was some misinformation spread online regarding projects in DDA not being available for brownfield tax capture. That is not true. This is funding tax capture mechanism that is specific to this. It actually is to be used to expedite development of properties where contaminants and pollution is found. And while the public commenter was right that this city council could say no to this because it isn't the ideal project in terms of our goals around the environment, I do want to point out that Destination Ann Arbor, organization that promotes tourism and brings a lot of money into the city by way of tourism, those the funding for Destination Ann Arbor and similar CVBs around the state and country relies on funding from tax captured by local hotel stays. So by increasing the amount of hotel availability and capacity in downtown, we are bringing tourists downtown, which has a ripple effect throughout our business community. So there is absolutely economic development to this benefit, and I think that was something that is probably relevant to debate and conversation tonight around this agenda item.
Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you, and thanks for explaining some of that background, Councilmember Cornell. To me, because of the timing of when this is coming up, it seems pretty clear that this isn't, well, at least what I read from the staff report is it doesn't seem like this project is at threat of not being built. Rather, it seems that they committed to implementing some sustainability elements that might not happen should they have to spend the money elsewhere. So I'm hoping that staff can answer a couple of questions related to this.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes, Mayor.
Is there a staff member ready to engage?
Mayor, I think Mr. Delacourt is on the line.
Mr. Delacourt.
Should be there.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, again, I see a microphone. Am I not?
You are audible but not visible.
Yeah, I don't understand, and I'm not sure why. I'm here and available to answer any questions you all may have.
Great.
All right, let's roll.
Okay.
Councilor Ackman.
Yep. Can you speak to the timing of this coming up? Kind of how standard is it for some kind of brownfield contaminant to be found partway through a project, and how that impacts the amount that can be asked for? That's my first question.
It brought me in, council member, but I believe it brought me in halfway through your question. So if you could clarify or restate it, I'd be glad to answer.
No problem. Hope that doesn't count against my time.
I'll be cool.
All right.
I'm hoping that you can speak to the fact that this, and I haven't looked at a lot of brownfield plans, so pardon me if this is very familiar to you, but can you just speak to the timing of this being, coming up kind of partway through a project, and how it impacts on the amount that can be asked for or gotten for the remediation?
Yeah, I'll talk about a couple of things related to the timing. In fact, for a lot of the conversation tonight, the developer actually approached me and staff, after the project had already been started. Unlike a lot of projects, for whatever reason, the contamination and the remediation necessary for it was not discovered until after the hole was being dug, and later in the process than is normally desired by us. So when the developer approached and started talking to us about the additional cost for the project, what items in the project were discretionary, what things may be able to be eliminated or value engineered to offset the additional cost of the property. To be quite honest, it was really me, staff, and specifically me, who suggested that even though it was late in the process, understanding the brownfield process and the ability for us to capture local mills to pay back specifically environmental remediation, not non-environmental, but environmental only, and that would work with the limited. I know $745,000 is not a small amount of change, but compared to most of the brownfield plans we do, it was rather small in size and quick to repay itself. And Nathan's here; he can correct me when I make a mistake, but I believe it repays itself within 1 or 2 years, and then the proceeds from the project go back to the local taxing jurisdictions. It was me who suggested that this project fit the mold specifically of what the brownfield legislation in Act 381 intends to do, and that is to clean up environmental remediation and to put brownfield sites on par with greenfields. And it was my suggestion that instead of removing items or value engineering the project, that they continue to include items in the project that are not codified or required by code, but were things they offered at the suggestion of the Planning Commission and Council that would be desirous by the community. So it was really me who suggested that they pursue this avenue as opposed to looking to remove or value engineer additional items out of the project. What that means from a cost standpoint is instead of 100% of the remediation being able to be reimbursed, we prorate it based on the local tax rate only. So it goes from 1 point something million if all of the mills would normally be required, down to about 745,000. And again, I'm going to look at Nathan as the expert, but I believe that's about 60% of what would normally be eligible to be reimbursed, because it is later in the process, because it did not start and the work actually started on the site prior to the plan being approved. This is the only way for us to achieve the look back possible to reimburse as much of the environmental activity as we can. So I've said a lot. I'll stop there. And if there's any questions, any additional questions, I'd be glad to clarify.
Further discussion? Councilmember Watson?
If council didn't approve the brownfield today, am I correct in thinking the remediation would still happen, or? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. I would, and I do not want to make it sound like the developer at any point came to staff and threatened to take the sustainability elements out of the project or get it. I would suggest that it is possible that they would look to, again, value engineer, like a lot of projects do, other items out of the project for something that is easily reimbursable and fits within the intention of the brownfield program, even though it doesn't meet our specific criteria for timing for a project like this.
Councilor Badish?
I think that you just indirectly answered a question that Councilmember Ackman raised but didn't actually ask, which was, did the development commit to make green energy and sustainability improvements that wouldn't be possible without the brownfield money? And I think you just spoke to that, but if you want to add anything to that, that would be great. And is it worth noting that, is this the first brownfield plan that we've seen since we don't have a council brownfield committee anymore?
Ooh, that's a good question. I want to say yes, council member, but my memory is not what it used to be, so I'm not going to swear to that. Oh, Nathan's shaking his head. He's better at remembering than I am. Have we done one since the council became the primary advisor? You're muted.
Now? Okay. Village of Ann Arbor, I think, was one.
That's good. Thank you. So we've done one.
Councilmember Ackman?
I don't think he really answered the other question that Councilmember Dish asked, though, which I would appreciate. Like, what what sustainability elements are they committed to if we accept this brownfield plan?
This ties them into the higher efficiency electric heating in the units and the solar associated with the project. And I believe Mr. Martin's there too, if he wants to add any detail to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that the timing thing is just, there's a little bit more of a backstory there if you want a couple of minutes of it, because I think it's kind of interesting. So would that be helpful? Yeah, so we bought the property in 1995, and at that point in time, we did a phase one. Environmentally speaking, in 1995, what they cared about were petrochemicals. And so that site is actually, and it's oriented is that way, is actually two parcels. And so there was a corner parcel that was a gas station. And so when we bought the property in 1995, and then there was another building there over time, but we didn't really have the history on it, and environmental folks weren't super curious about that at the time. We did everything, or everything was done at the gas station to get it to the place where we thought that the site was in a good spot to go forward. And so we had started this project pre-COVID, COVID hit, hospitality, no one was staying in hotels, we put the brakes on it. At the same point in time, we had a commitment with Marriott that we were going to build this project eventually. And so post-COVID, things started to get a little bit better. We had some kind of clarity around hospitality. We decided to go for the project again. And started doing all the submissions. We came to the planning commission, said, hey, here are the things that we want to incorporate into the project, the sustainability aspects of it. And in between going to planning commission and putting a shovel in the ground, we went and found a lender to help us finance the project. And the lender said, we'd like to do a new phase one. We have the one from 1995. It's not worth a whole lot. Well, it turns out that the second lot at one point in time had a dry cleaner on it. And fast forward to 2024, and people are pretty concerned about dry cleaners and the chemicals that they had. So that's where the timing kind of got all awash. At the same point in time, putting brakes on the project then wouldn't have worked, just because we had a contract with Marriott that we had to get started by a certain point in time. So that's why it's this kind of just, as Derek described it, a weird timing thing where we discovered this, and I reached out to him and said, hey, here's what's going on. Do you have any ideas? And, we've got this kind of unexpected, large expense in our lap. And he said, hey, I think there's a possibility here, and let's explore it. And so I appreciate that staff's been, super helpful from that perspective. But yeah, the things that we are looking to try and maintain are the highest efficiency in-unit all electric units that we can, and the solar on the roof. And so, the fallback would be either less efficient units or, Ken's a good buddy now, but moving to gas in that project is something that could still be done. It is underway, Ken, but it's still something that could be done. And, at the end of the day, there's this financial delta, and so operating costs for gas are cheaper than electric. This is the way it is. So, our ideal would be to maintain the product as we currently have it, and this would be an elegant way to help us cover the cost of the unexpected. And, truly, just it's environmental, right? We're not asking for anything else. So, that's kind of a little bit more of the nuance on the timing, and happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Cornell.
I just want to point out for context that the brownfield abatement that is being requested here is around $750-ish thousand, and this is a $16 million investment. So I think we need to underscore that this is a significant investment that will improve the tax base downtown. And the abatement, the incentive will be for 5 years, a period of 5 years. And that's pretty typical. And again, just to what Mr. Martin said, this is really, it is gate kept, that's not the right word, it's restricted to this environmental remediation work only, unlike other incentives, which may be applicable for projects and developments downtown.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks for all the answers to questions, and I appreciate our public commenter coming out and raising some of the questions on this. I understand the desire to try to get the most that we can when leveraging our tax dollars for a project. I think that this investment is in line with what brownfield dollars were intended to do, and that we're using them to make the site cleaner, and they're helping to support a cleaner, more environmentally friendly building than we would get otherwise. And so while there's always desire for more sustainability elements, I think we're seeing an investment in this building that is greater than what's required by code, and I'm supportive of moving this forward.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DS2, resolution authorizing summary publication of Ordinance 2420 and ordinance to amend Section 5.18, 5.22, 5.29, and 5.37 of Chapter 55 Unified Development Code of Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember.
Mayor Taylor.
Oh, does that also get postponed? Well, it needs to get moved and seconded before we can postpone it. Moved by Dish, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Councilmember Rodino.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly, I would move to postpone this item to our next meeting.
Second by Councilmember Watson. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? It is postponed. And the resolution's so nice we did it twice. DS0, resolution to revise previous approval of issuance of new Class C.
This is DC.
No.
DC0 now. The one we have to read.
DC0, yeah. And aren't I reading it?
I thought you said one.
Oh, I may have actually said one. Let us not quibble. The resolution that we are now currently going to engage is resolution to revise, by whatever name, resolution to revise the previous approval of issuance of new Class C quota liquor license in the City of Ann Arbor to Cella's Restaurant and Taqueria, moved by Councilmember Cornell, second by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion. Councilmember Watson.
Councilmember Redina spoke at the top of the meeting about this, but this is clarifying. There was initially one address on the state application. This is updating it to reflect the current address of Cella's, and it updates the application, allows them to keep moving forward with the process with the state.
Excellent. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is approved. DC1, resolution in support of ordinance to add a new section 9.155.1 to Chapter 112, non-discrimination, right to sit, moved by Councilmember Ghazi Edwin, seconded by Councilmember Redina. Discussion, please, of DC1. Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Thank you, Mayor. As I stated earlier, this resolution was written in collaboration with the Commission on Disability Issues, the Human Rights Commission, as well as my fellow co-sponsors, due to the desire to ensure that values underlying this initiative are effectively and clearly communicated. Upon further consultation with stakeholders, there's a strong desire to strengthen the resolution by adding an additional resolved clause. So I would like to make a motion to propose an amendment. Clerk Beaudry, could you please circulate the amendment?
Oh, it may be attached already to the... I don't believe it is.
Let me see. It is.
Is it?
Yep.
Carry on.
Okay. So the final resolved clause would read, resolved, the Ann Arbor City Council directs the Ann Arbor City Administrator to engage with the Michigan State Legislature to advocate for statewide legislation ensuring all workers the right to sit.
Seconded by Councilmember Regina. Is that friendly to the body? Friendly to the body. Further discussion of the main motion as amended. Councilmember Gaziano.
Thank you. I am excited to share that since our last council meeting, Rep. Dylan Wigela has introduced statewide legislation advocating for the right to sit, and I sincerely hope that it will receive the support it deserves and ultimately pass. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC2, resolution for county millage rebate use, moved by Councilmember Harrison, seconded by Councilmember Song. Discussion, please, of DC2. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you, Mayor. A strong social safety net works hand in hand with unarmed crisis response to ensure both mental well-being and public safety. You simply can't have a comprehensive, sustainable unarmed crisis response program without maintaining the foundation of services at the necessary funding levels. This is why it's crucial that we support this balanced allocation today. I'd like to thank Mayor Taylor, Councilmember Song, Councilmember Briggs, Councilmember Redina, and Councilmember Iyer for sponsoring the resolution directing the city administrator to develop an unarmed public safety response program back in April of 2021, and for their tireless efforts over the years in recognizing this critical link in pushing for solutions. I understand the community's frustration and disappointment, which is exactly why we are seeking a sustainable funding source that will enable us to meet these challenges long term. Providing the financial stability we need to support both unarmed crisis response and the supportive services that will assist with making unarmed crisis response more effective. This resolution is about making sure we have a safety net that supports mental health, public safety, and long-term community stability in a way that is sustainable for years to come. Thank you.
Councilmember Song.
I really appreciate how Councilmember Harrison frames it as a safety network. If we travel back in time a little bit during the pandemic and remember how difficult it was for our social service agencies to receive not only adequate but timely funding across various entities, locally, state, finally the feds was able to shepherd some funding. But the wheels of bureaucracy are so slow until we can have all these conversations on where we want funding to land. But the reality is that a lot of funding is restricted. A lot of funding, again, is slow. And then we're not necessarily as responsive as we'd like to imagine ourselves to be. So I would hope to think that this effort is actually timely and responsive, given the lessons that we learned during the pandemic. ARPA funding's gone. It's dried up. And we have not returned philanthropy has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. So I appreciate this effort because it's funding that will come annually, and it's funding that's tied with a variety of services that our most vulnerable community members need, right? Supportive services, housing, substance abuse. And these are not cheap services. And this is funding that I'm so proud of Ann Arbor for helping to provide. Again, I'd love to say that we're the only municipality that gives funding to, the work that we see at the county. And now to have this county level funding be coordinated in this manner. I hope the test for us for the future is that we make this an ongoing commitment. So thank you for everyone for organizing around this and to speaking to it.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you, and thank you to all the co-sponsors for bringing this forward. I'd like to be added as one. This really is the culmination of a lot of work over the years, starting, at least for my part, back in 2016 when I was serving on the County Board of Commissioners, and I was part of a small working group that initially imagined this mental health and public safety millage. And I remember at the time sitting down and talking with Sheriff Clayton about the ways in which he was reimagining public safety and the need to provide mental health services. Along with that, I recall at the time how important it was in the discussions that City Council in Ann Arbor publicly say how they plan to use the rebate. And that was really important to communicate to voters before asking them to approve the millage. Of course, that was done, and it was allocated in the previous 40-40-20 split. And certain council members over the years tried to change it up, but Mayor Taylor held firm, sometimes having to issue the veto. Appreciate that. And here we are now with a climate action millage, and we're able to use 40% of that for a new purpose. And I'm really happy that we are now using it, coming full circle to what I started talking about, which was the public safety and reimagining how we do public safety here. And we're finding that it isn't as easy as we thought it would be to set up an unarmed crisis response program. And there are legal issues that we need to deal with, and there are organizational issues. But that work continues in earnest. I'm grateful for our city administrator for his commitment to it, for visiting later this month a program that he thinks we might learn from. And I'm glad to be supporting this tonight to provide an ongoing source of revenue for this work that we can count on going forward.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I want to echo my thanks for the original sponsors of this and would like to be added as well. I think we've heard now for a couple of meetings from our public commenters about specifically the importance of the 40% that is used to fund supportive services for residents here in Ann Arbor. And I want to just uplift how important that is. We've talked a lot at this table about the importance of finding ongoing funds for unarmed crisis response so that we can get that program off the ground. We hear from the service providers how critically important this money is for the work that they do in the community, which is often in itself a preventative work for our community as well. But none of it is possible unless this actually passes. And so while we are pre-dedicating how we would spend these funds if this millage rebate is provided to the city of Ann Arbor. All of this is only possible if voters continue to place their trust in the county and in the city to do this work. And so when I filled out my absentee ballot, I made sure that I voted yes on Washtenaw County Proposal 4. I would urge all of our residents to do so as well. This is really, really important funding for really, really important work in our community. So not only are we doing the work here to make sure that we spend this money appropriately and on our community values, we have to make sure that this passes. So please vote yes on Proposal 4.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Yes, Councilmember Redana just said what I was hoping, and which is that we all need to vote yes for this. This is important for residents all across the county, and including, of course, our own residents. I also wanted to just thank the folks who are in the audience today who've held out to the very end. Thank you for coming in and for the work that you're doing on behalf of your agencies. It's really important to our community. Thanks for sharing that tonight. And to the folks who emailed us and said, shared their support, appreciate that as well. We just have such great people doing this work, usually behind the scenes, and so thank you. And again, I think that obviously it's quite important that we let voters know what we're going to do with this, with our rebate, and expressing what our unmet needs are today, and communicating how we're going to use those funds. So I'm excited to be able, if this passes, which to advance and continue to advance some of our most important unmet needs in our community. So thank you, and also please add me as a co-sponsor.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank co-sponsors and all, the members of the audience who waited out to the end, people who called in. What I am excited about this, really excited about this for, is that we're still allocating resources to unarmed crisis response, but we're also following the housing first approach, which shows that, if you address housing first, you can reduce incidences of interactions between people who are housing insecure and the police. If you do housing first, you can reduce the prevalence of mental illness and substance abuse. So I wholeheartedly support this. I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor. And I hope that our community members can all vote yes on Proposal 4. Thank you.
Councilmember Watson.
So this allocation of the rebate represents the money that the city, the money that the county rebates to the city because we provide our own police force and our own police patrol. If this had been at the township level, that would be to expand services there. So the 37% of the millage that you pay to the community mental health department still goes there. The 38% that goes to the sheriff's office to provide additional services, some of which are provided through Avalon, as they reminded us during those discussions, that money still goes there. So this is only about $3 million of a millage that is much bigger. But there are so few sources for for recurring funds for services. And yeah, as we know, the housing first model means you have to be providing services on those sites, because otherwise it becomes very difficult to live on these sites. And so one sign of how difficult it was to find services is we at the urban county, which I serve on through as a designee from council, we used the Home ARP COVID funding, which we had hoped to be using all for housing development. A portion of that had to go to services just to plug gaps. And so the fact that this is a recurring source of revenue funded through a millage means it is so important, and it'll never feel like enough. And I'm very grateful to the members of the community, including the entire continuum of care, because it takes so much coordination from our nonprofits, our city housing commission, our county partners at OCED to get this network of services provided. And I know every year with inflation, the costs and the difficulties increase. One more note on the unarmed response portion is we know from the Durham model, I think they spend about $5 million a year on unarmed response. So this is kind of earmarking $1.2 million, but it'll take a lot of work to make a full unarmed response program. But I think it's good to start with an amount earmarked here.
Councilmember Dish.
I would like to be added as a co-sponsor, and everyone has spoken so eloquently that I will not keep us any later by adding any words that will pale in comparison.
Further discussion? Well, I don't know if I'll add, but I'll add. I'll say merely this, that it is, I think over the years there's been a fair bit of rhetorical blood spilled about the community mental health millage and the prior 40-40-20 resolution, and I am glad that the millage is presently on the ballot, and I do indeed hope it passes, and pleased that council is again making a commitment to the voters as to how we intend to spend the rebate money in the event that we are entrusted with it. As we did back in 2017, we reflected upon community needs that were not which did not have dedicated funding, which did not have adequate funding. Back in 2017, of course, we looked to pedestrian safety, climate action, and affordable housing. Now in 2024, we continue to observe a gap in pedestrian safety funding, and so we are looking to continue with that. We also see the need with respect to our affordable housing stock. No longer do we have a substantial capital need as a result of the wisdom of staff and the generosity of voters with respect to the affordable housing millage. And so now we turn to another unmet need, and that is human services at affordable housing sites. Crucial for the success of the organization and crucial, more importantly, for the success of their residents. And then finally, we are going to be incubating a program that is been a long-standing community aspiration, an unarmed response program. As has been indicated, $1.2 million is likely inadequate for the final purpose, but it is also a necessary condition for getting the project moving forward. And in that regard, I'm delighted that we're doing it. I look forward to our work in this regard, and I know that the residents are as well. Further discussion. Councilmember Song.
This is actually a really good example of why a proposal on the ballot is really problematic. Prop D claims that we have funding available for candidates to run for office, amounting to about $400,000 a year. And here we are trying to figure out funding that we could have used over the past couple of years, actually in service to our community members in need. And this is the work that we do. This is how we dedicate funding. Every single dollar has a purpose and has an end. It doesn't always come reliably, and thank goodness for the voters who do commit to supporting this kind of funding that does come reliably. I think you'll remember how we had to do a budget amendment, I think a year or so ago, when we had a number of homeless families who were hoteling and they needed housing. They were unable to continue to stay in the hotels if it wasn't for our emergency funding. Jewish Family Services is now currently housing 10 families in hotels, from the airport right to the hotel. The housing costs for our refugees and immigrants through that agency alone is $100,000 a month. So when we consider how we fund our best efforts to take care of our community members, I would hope that it comes as a priority above this proposal, which would be to fund campaigns. We campaign to take care of others. That's what we campaign for, not to take public funding for our own personal interests. So I hope we can make that connection too.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC3, resolution authorizing summary publication of Ordinance 2419 and Ordinance to amend Section 5.16.3 and 5.17.7 of Chapter 55, Unified Development Code of Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Cornell, second by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, of DC3. All in favor? Opposed? It's approved. DC4, resolution to restate and rename the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council to the Downtown Development Area Resident Consultancy Council. Moved by Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, of DC4. Councilmember Cornell.
It is so thrilling to be the person who gets to talk about tax increment financing here twice in one night. Just trying to spice this up for everyone a little bit. This actually is an existing advisory council to the Downtown Development Authority, which is required by state statute to have a group of people who reside in the DDA area serve as a consultative group to its work, which would then advise council. The DDA would advise council. What this changes from what was previously in line, again with state statute, is to bring this in line that would make this group, this consultative group, inclusive of all residents, which is pretty big because we have a lot of folks who live here and by nature of not owning property would not necessarily qualify as a citizen, so that allows more diversity on this group. It is a renaming, as we said, and it allows the DDA to have a little more flexibility in terms of who it is able to bring onto this advisory council by, again, not making it just citizens. The requirements would be that those eligible to serve on this committee are residents of the DDA and are at least 18 years of age. They would be appointed to 3-year terms and staggered, much like council. I am appreciative of DDA's commitment to getting as many people involved in this as possible and having a diversity of voices at the table, and I hope that my colleagues will support it.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. Do we have the pleasure of a closed session today?
No, thank you, Mayor.
We have before us the clerk's report of communications. Without petitions or referrals, may I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Ghazi Edwin, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. Are there communications today from our city attorney?
No, thank you, Mayor.
In the absence of public comment overflow, may I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.